चक्षु तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे विशेष शून्यवादी अभ्यातिदूषितानि वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा. Thank you very much for joining today. And we move toward the concluding sections of our discussion on Anandavan Champu. Now, a quick recap of what we have discussed till now and the approach that we have taken that will determine, contextualize how we're going to take it forward today. So in the first session, I introduced what is Anandavan Champu and how it explains, it elaborates, elucidates on Krishna Leela by revealing some additional details of known pastimes, by giving some different perspectives, by using beautiful metaphors, and by even revealing additional pastimes. So in the first session, I discussed the pastime of Putana. In the second session, I discussed the pastime of Kaliya primarily. The third session, I discussed about the Purva Rag, the development of Radharani's relationship with Krishna primarily. So two pastimes was the awakening of the Purva Rag in terms of Radharani feeling that she's attracted to three different people. And then the second part was about how Radharani started cooking for Krishna. So today we will move on to what has been traditionally the heart of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the relationship between Radharani and Krishna, the love of Radharani for Krishna, and how that love culminates in the feeling of separation. The Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he especially manifested that mood of love in separation. So the dynamism of separation and union that is most vividly seen in the Anand Vrindavan, in the Anandavan Champu's description of Rasa Leela. So what I'll be doing in today's session will be discussing the Rasa Leela in broadly three perspectives. The first will be how the Rasa Leela itself is, what is the mood in which the Rasa Leela is depicted in the Anandavan Champu, then how that mood is illustrated. So I'll use the PowerPoint as a whiteboard, as I mentioned, as we have done before also. So the mood of depiction, then how that mood is revealed, and lastly, how that mood matters for us as sadhakas. So the mood of depiction, what does that mean? Basically, that whenever a particular pastime is performed, that same pastime can be analyzed from different perspectives. Now, if we consider, say, an incident like Lord Ram's being exiled. Now, if we talk about this particular pastime, so depicting a pastime, if you consider, this pastime can be seen from the perspective, if you consider Lord Ram's being exiled, this pastime can be seen from perspective of various characters. And that means when you see from the perspective of various characters, so if we see it from the perspective of, say, Kaushalya, Lord Ram's mother, she was heartbroken just when her son was going to become the king, and all the years and decades of negligence that she had suffered because her husband Dashrath had favored Kaikeyi, that was going to end. And just when it was going to end, Kaikeyi did something more, and she was plunged into far greater misery. So from Kaushalya's perspective, it is in one sense continuation and even aggravation of existing misery. There's distress, but there is continuation and aggravation. Yeah, she always felt neglected by her husband. She always felt that her husband was favoring somebody else, another co-wife, and that to a junior co-wife. But here, her husband sent her son away. So it was an existing distress which was escalated. Now, from Lord Ram's perspective, what happened was that we could say that fortune suddenly turned into misfortune. So he had not done anything wrong because of which he should have to be exiled, but he was exiled. And it's like one day, say, one day somebody in a prosperous home, and they are going to become they're going to get the they are going to inherit the company that their father has built or something like that. They're going to ascend to the position of the director or whatever. And the next day, they are just kicked out of the house, saying that you are not even a member of this family. So for Lord Ram's perspective, it was fortune suddenly turning into misfortune. If we consider from Sita's perspective, it was a test of her faith, that now would she stay with her husband and Lord through thick and through thin. So for Lakshman, it was a test of his service attitude to his brother. And what is the test of his service? So his service attitude, he had a service attitude towards his parents, he had his father, his brother. Whom does he serve and how does he serve? So the same pastime, when events are happening, they can be perceived from one perspective, and the events are seen a particular way. They're seen from another perspective, and they're seen in a different way. There are often retellings. If some movie or some novel becomes very famous, then sometimes that same novel or movie is retold from the perspective of another character's voice. So what Anand Vrindavan Champu is doing is, and this is where Anand Vrindavan Champu and Gopal Champu is a book written by Jiva Goswami. So there is a significant difference between the two. So Anand Vrindavan Champu, so what it does is, its depicts Ras Leela from the Gopis' perspective, primarily from Radharani's perspective. So it's Radharani's perspective. That means when the Ras Leela is happening, what exactly is going on? What are the Gopis thinking? And what is primarily Radharani thinking? So generally, if we watch a particular, say if you watch a movie or read a novel, if it's only describing events, okay, this happened and this happened, this happened, this happened, okay, that becomes like an action novel or action movie, which is fine. It is a genre in itself, which is exciting. But if along with that, there are moments when we get insights into the thoughts of the characters. Okay, what is it that is motivating a particular person? And then that makes us come closer to the character. that makes us identify with the character better. And then, so actions are, so observing actions can be entertaining, but understanding motivations is illuminating. Now I'm using the word illumination in here in terms of we understand a whole new, almost like a world opens up. Okay, this is why this person was doing like this. This was why this person was doing like that. And that's where actually whenever any story is there, that actually becomes fascinating when we can start sensing, okay, why did this person do like this? Could this person have done like that? And why did they choose to do like this in this situation? So what the acharyas do is, by their depth of devotion and by the breadth of their realizations, they actually give us insights into the thought process of the Lord. If we consider of the Lord and the devotees in connection with the Lord. Now there is we could talk about this from a progressive revelation of divinity in our sacred scriptures also. If you see, if you consider the Gita, it establishes the identity of God. The Bhagavatam, it describes the activity of God. You see, in the Gita, Krishna is not doing much action apart from instructing, but the Bhagavatam is filled with pastimes of Krishna. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita, what it is doing is, it is describing the mentality of God. Now the word mentality sometimes is negative consequence, he's got a very bad mentality. But here I'm using the word mentality in a very objective or functional sense to refer to the mind of God. What are his thoughts? So the inner thinking of the Lord is not revealed so much in the Bhagavatam itself. Of course, we get a lot of insights about that also through the commentaries of the acharyas. If we focus on the book itself, however, in the book, the Chaitanya Charitamrita itself reveals how Krishna felt a sense of incompleteness, because of which he said, I need the gopis experience more ecstasy than what I do. The gopis experience such love for me. Where does this love come from? I want to know this. And for that purpose, what did they do? What did you do? They actually say Lord Chaitanya is Krishna who takes the form of Radharani. So that is one aspect of understanding this. Now, with this in mind, there can be a progressive revelation of divinity of the Lord, but there can also be a progressively intimate revelation of the devotee, of the gopis. So not just what the gopis do, but what the gopis think. And among the gopis, what does Radharani think? That is what is revealed in the in the Anandandavan Champu. So if we consider from the point of view of the Gita, there is a description of devotees' characteristics. So for example, in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where the Chaturshloki is described, it describes how Kathayantaschamam nityam tushyanti charamanti cha. So the devotees, what kind of activities do they do? That is, how do we define a devotee? How do we characterize a devotee? The characteristics are described. Now, but if you consider the Bhagavatam, there is description of devotees' lives. So we had the description of Prahlad's life, how he was persecuted and still he remained faithful. Ambarish Maharaj's life, how he was so exalted, such a powerful king, and yet he was so detached. Now Chaitanya Charitamrita, if we consider from that perspective, we have the Gita, the Bhagavatam. Now here we'll not go into the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Here we'll focus on the Anandandavan Champu. I'm just trying to establish a context for the Anandandavan Champu's mood. So Anandandavan Champu, it gives a description of devotees and especially here specifically their thoughts. So, and specifically the gopis' thoughts. So it's like a closer and closer vision, but it's not just closer in terms of physical proximity, closer in terms of we get an inner picture of what a person is thinking. So with this context, let's see what the Anandavan Champu does in the Rasa Leela. Now, to understand how it is depicted, we need to first get a quick understanding of the Rasa Leela itself. So what is the Rasa Leela basically? It is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam in chapters 29 to 30, 4 chapters, 29, 30, 31, 32, and 33. So now in these chapters, essentially what happens is, in chapter 29, Krishna plays his flute. Krishna calls the gopis with his flute song. And then they come. And when they come, there is some discussion between them at that time. But the primary focus is on how the gopis, they leave everything and they come to Krishna. And then in chapter 30, what happens is, Krishna discusses and disappears. So we'll go a little bit into the chapters once again as we're going into the how this is described in Anandavan Champu. But let's focus here. So what happens is, Krishna and the gopis have some discussion, and Krishna uses a poetic language, double meaning kind of puns and other figures of speech, and so do the gopis. And then eventually, from the narrative of the Bhagavatam, it seems that the Krishna and the gopis are about to perform the rasa dance, and at that time Krishna sees that the gopis have become proud and he disappears for them. He disappears. And then now gopis call Krishna by singing the Gopi Geet. So it's interesting how it is. There's like an inversion now between chapter 29 and chapter 31. Chapter 29 is Krishna calling the gopis. And now chapter 31 is the gopis calling Krishna. They call Krishna back, please return. Then after that, in chapter 32, what happens is Krishna returns and discusses with the gopis. So here the discussion is slightly different. In chapter 30, the discussion was about the appropriateness of the gopis being there. Krishna says it's nighttime. This forest is not a safe place. Why are you here? Please go back. So in one sense, here the focus of the discussion is on the appropriateness of the gopis' actions. But so is it right for the gopis to have left everything and come? That is the discussion in chapter 30. But in chapter 32, indirectly it's a discussion of the appropriateness of Krishna's action. What is Krishna's action over here? He's leaving the gopis and going away, departing from there. So the gopis question him indirectly by asking him about the nature of love. There are different people who reciprocate with love in different ways, and they indirectly ask which is the best. So that is chapter 32. And chapter 33 is the performance of the Rasa dance. So the gopis and Krishna perform the Rasa Leela, where they dance together in a celebration of divine love. And after that, they depart. So Krishna, the gopis return home, and it's not described explicitly that Krishna returns home. Of course, Krishna also returns home, it's understood. But the focus is on how the gopis return home. And there it is described that Yogamaya arranges in such a way that the Vraja life goes on. The other Vrajavasis do not think that, especially the Gopis family members, they think that actually the Gopis didn't go out. They wanted to go out, but they didn't go out. If we get time, we'll discuss about how this is arranged. But now the Rasliya itself is a huge, complex, and very absorbing pastime. And we could discuss that pastime itself in great detail. However, what we are focusing on is that how the Anandandavan Champu describes this pastime from the perspective of the gopis. So now if we are not familiar with the original pastime itself, then if a pastime is described from a particular perspective, hey, what's so special about it? Is there something special about it? Yeah, it is. If we are already interested in a subject, then okay, this is this person's side of the story. This is this person's side of the story. This is this person's side of the story. Okay, we want to know more about it. We want to know more from different perspectives. The Ras Leela itself is, at one level, the highest expression of love. Now, in this session, we are not going to go into the moral dimensions of the Ras Leela, but we'll just focus on the importance of Ras Leela over here. Why is the Ras Leela such an important pastime? Because it demonstrates the summit of selfless love. Now, what do we mean by selfless love? That normally the idea in love is that there is a reciprocation. Love always, so love involves reciprocation. So a person A loves a person B, the devotee loves the Lord, and the Lord reciprocates. Now, sometimes there are romantic novels and romantic movies about unrequited or unreciprocated love, where one person is madly in love with the other person, but the other person just doesn't pay any attention, doesn't reciprocate. And now it's one thing where the other person wants to reciprocate, but they are unable to reciprocate. Circumstantially, they cannot be together because of some reasons. But that is where the other person, when you could say that is more of thwarted love. So there are two things. There is thwarted love. Thwart means thwarted or obstructed love, where external obstacles stop lovers from being together. So that is the thwarted love. But we have the unrequited love. Unrequited love means what? Internal obstacles. So internal obstacles, what do you mean? Internal obstacles means one of the persons is just not interested in the other person. So one person is madly in love, the other person doesn't reciprocate at all. And if you consider in any story, unless there is some amount of tension, some amount of unpredictability, some amount of turns and twists of stories, then it is not very exciting. There has to be some narrative tension somewhere. So what happens is, in Krishna Leela, sorry, some kind of insect here. So in Krishna Leela, if you consider from one perspective, Krishna is all powerful. So what happens is that it is tension that captures attention. If there is no tension, then okay, this is a nice story, but what's special about it? If there's a story in which the hero eats a heroine, and the heroine likes the hero likes the heroine, and then both of them meet, and then they come together, and that's the end of the story. Yeah, oh really? Well, there has to be some tension, some unpredictability, some uncertainty. What is going to happen? And that unpredictability may come because of internal obstacles or external obstacles. So now, with respect to Krishna Leela, if we consider that Krishna Leela tension. How can there be tension in Krishna Leela? Because Krishna is supreme. So nobody can thwart his will. So no external obstacle no external obstacle can thwart Krishna's will, because he is supreme. And if there is a devotee, there is no internal obstacle for a devotee, because a devotee loves the Lord. So because of that, then what do we do? Where will the obstacles come from? So it's interesting that without obstacles, there will be no tension, there will be no excitement. So what happens is, it is by Krishna's will that obstacles are created. It is by Krishna's will that obstacles are created, just so that there will be some excitement, there will be some tension, there will be some anxiety. And through that, there will be a greater intensity in the unfolding of, in the expression of love. There will be excitement in the unfolding of the Leela. So let's try to understand this, that how does Krishna create obstacles? There are no external obstacles, but obstacles are created by Krishna's will. So what are the obstacles created by Krishna's will? In one sense, we could say Vrindavan is, it's a very traditional, conservative kind of society. So like last time we discussed about how when all the Vrajavasis want Radha and Krishna to be together, but at the same time, the way they come together is Radharani serves Krishna some prasad, and then she's shy and hesitant to go and serve. So in a traditional society, it's very difficult for them to meet each other publicly. So now, in many of the later retellings or the expansions of the Leela of Krishna, there are many ways in which this tension, in which this anxiety is created. So there are deeper revelations of how, although God is omnipotent, it is by his will, that certain obstacles are created, so that his own Leela becomes more exciting. So it's that first aspect is that Vrindavan is a very traditional society. And then, although at one level, the gopis, all of Vrindavan, all the Vrajavasis want Krishna and the gopis Krishna and especially Radharani to be together. But at the same time, Krishna himself arranges in such a way that he creates obstacles for their union, so that the love, there's tension in the love. So what is one of the obstacles? So Krishna, in one sense, makes unreasonable demands from them. What is the unreasonable demand? He plays a flute and he calls all of them to come. So at this point, it is Krishna and Radharani, Krishna and the gopis, they don't have any formal relationship. And in a traditional society, for the gopis to leave everything and come to Krishna, that is unacceptable. That they would be socially shamed by that. They would get ruined if they did that. And yet Krishna makes such a demand from them. So now what happens is, in different contexts, we can see love. How is love seen? Now, why would Krishna make such a demand from his devotees also? So how is love seen? Love is seen in many different ways. But broadly, we can say that what we give to our beloved and what we give up for our beloved. They're two related, but at the same time, two different things. So if a person loves another person, then what do they give to them? They give them some special gifts. They give them something valuable, something precious. And then what we give to our beloved, and the second is what we give up for our beloved. So say somebody gives a very precious gift as an expression of their love. That's one way. Now this could be and what we give up for our beloved. Say if there is a family in which one of the mother or the father, both the mother and father are working, and one of them gets an opportunity to get a very good promotion in their job, and then they have to go somewhere else in a completely different place, but that is going to disrupt their family. The children are in a good school and they're doing well, and disrupting them is not very good for them. And then either parent, they decide, okay, I'm not going to do this. So that is the expression of their love. So what we give and what we give up. So I mentioned that the Ras Leela describes the summit of selfless love. So how is that? So in the Ras Leela, what are the gopis give themselves to Krishna. When Krishna calls them, the gopis just immediately go to him. And in giving themselves to Krishna, what are they doing? They are giving up their social status, and they are accepting, not only giving up social status, they're accepting, in that context, they're accepting social ruination. So if a woman is known to be, say, a loose woman, a woman who is not chaste, especially in traditional kind of society, that would be considered nobody would want to be with such a woman in terms of a marriage with such a person, and that could ruin the person, ruin that particular woman. But the gopis are ready to do even that for Krishna. So in that sense, when the gopis respond to Krishna's love call, Krishna plays his flute and calls the gopis, what is happening is that the gopis are demonstrating sarva dharman parityajya. So the gopis' selfless love. What is the selfless love for Krishna? This is actually what is called as parakiya ras. So parakiya ras is what? That the gopis give themselves to Krishna. The queens of Dwarka also give themselves to Krishna, but get nothing, not even his name in return. They get nothing from Krishna, and yet they are immediately and wholeheartedly ready to give themselves to Krishna. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says sarva dharman parityajya. He's not saying sarva adharman parityajya. He's saying sarva dharman, that even that which is good, even that which is virtuous. So for a woman to have a reputation of being chaste, of being faithful, that is a good thing. And the gopis are ready to give up even that for Krishna's sake. And that is the greatness of their love. Now, of course, from a philosophical perspective, there is nothing wrong. Philosophical perspective, if we consider, there is absolutely nothing wrong in what the gopis do. Because what is it? From the gopis' perspective, see, Krishna is the Lord of everyone, including the gopis. So therefore, when the gopis go to Krishna, it is something which is completely natural and normal. So I'll illustrate this with an example before we move into the details of this pastime. So what is happening over here is that the drama metaphor. We consider the drama metaphor over here. It is like, say, a couple are happily married, and they are participating in a drama. in which the woman, the wife, is not married to the husband. And still they are trying to be together with each other. So the couple are happily married. This is the tattva of Radha, because that the couple are happening. This is the tattva of Krishna Gopi relationships. Why this is the tattva? Because Krishna is the Lord of all living beings. So from a philosophical perspective, it is that Krishna and the Gopi, everybody belongs to Krishna. All living beings belong to Krishna. All living beings are his parts. So even the gopis are his parts. And Radharani is his part. But the Leela is like a drama. And in that drama, Krishna and the gopis, they don't have any direct relationship. So this is the Leela that creates, that has tension. So this is a setting in which tension is created so that there is excitement, so that there is further unfoldment of the pastime and how things move forward. So that's what is going on over here. Now, if you consider from this perspective, the gopis being in the Parkiya means they are not immoral, they are transmoral. So there are three levels. We could say that you want to consider the moral dimensions of the pastime. There is, normally we talk about these two levels, moral, and below the moral is immoral. But here we could have one more, this transmoral. Transmoral means it is above morality. It is above the moral dimension. It is, why is it above morality? Because the morality is in the world necessary to regulate people from their lower passions. So immoral means giving in to lower desires. So the lower desires may be lust, they may be greed, they may be envy. When we act immorally, we give in to our lower desires. When we are moral, we restrain our lower desires. Somebody acts morally. But transmoral means that acting solely out of love with no trace of any lower desires. So Krishna is all pure. Krishna has no lower desires, and the gopis also have no lower desires. So their relationship is completely pure. And yet, what to speak of the world misunderstanding the Krishna Gopi pastime, even in Vrindavan, some of the Vrajavasis act as if they don't understand. And they obstruct. So when Krishna plays the flute, and he plays the flute, and then the gopis, they just leave everything. Sarva dharman parityajya maham ekam sharanam vraja. They leave everything to rush toward Krishna. And as they are rushing toward Krishna, what happens is their family members try to oppose. And somehow the gopis dodge, and then they arrive. And different gopis have to make different arrangements to get to Krishna. So in one sense, is described that the gopis arrive in the Vrindavan forest, in the Rasasthali, the way waves arrive in an ocean. That means one group of gopis comes, then another group of gopis comes, then another group of gopis comes. So it's each gopi is coming in her own way, navigating her own obstacles. And she's hearing the call of Krishna by who is playing his flute. And she just cannot do anything, cannot think of anything else. She has to respond. She's pulled by Krishna's call. And finally, they reach Krishna. Now, when they reach Krishna at that particular time, even, so as I said, the whole pastime the tension is created so that the pastime becomes more exciting. So here the gopis, after going through great obstacles, somehow dodging their family members, have reached Krishna. And then Krishna himself exhibits a contrary attitude. I talked about there are internal obstacles and there are external obstacles. So the external obstacles are when someone doesn't want, somebody outside obstructs. But here it seems Krishna himself is obstructing. So Krishna, he has been playing his flute, absorbed in playing his flute, and the gopis come and see him, and they are completely mesmerized by the sound of the flute, mesmerized by the sight of Krishna playing that flute, and mesmerized by the anticipation that they are now with Krishna and they will perform further pastimes with him. And then Krishna continues playing the flute as the gopis keep coming, wave after wave after wave after wave. And just like in the Kaliya pastime, finally, so waves of gopis keep coming till finally Radharani arrives. Now we may say that Radharani has the greatest love for Krishna, so shouldn't she be the first person to respond and come? Well, yes. In her heart, as soon as she hears Krishna's flute, she wants to come immediately. But by the very nature of the Braja pastimes, she faces the greatest obstacles. And she's unable to dodge all those obstacles. But finally, somehow she manages and she comes. And then when finally she arrives, at that time Krishna and the gopis start having a discussion. So Krishna says, "Oh gopis, welcome." And Bhadra, he says, "It is good that you have come here." And Krishna starts playing with them, but not in the way they had expected. Krishna, he says that this is night time and it is dangerous for you to be here. So what has brought you here? Is it that you wanted to see the beauty of the forest of Vrindavan? And especially now it is autumn, it is full moon. Yes, it is spectacularly beautiful. And you have been here for some time now. You observed the beauty of the forest. So please go back now. So when Krishna starts speaking like this, Krishna actually in one sense gives instructions on dharma, on duty and virtue and morality to the gopis. And when Krishna does that, at that time what happens is the gopis feel so what happens at that time is that when Krishna sees the gopis, and when Krishna tells this to the gopis start becoming very discontented. They said, "We know why you know why we have come here. Why we have come here? It is because you called." Now they are not ready to express. They are still shy. So they, in their own ways, try to express their dissatisfaction with the direction in which this discussion is going. So what is happening is that Krishna is testing the selflessness of their love. They left everything and come, but do they really want to come? Do they really want to be here? So normally this pastime is so great that normally if you say reminders of dharma, you can say duty, morality, whatever word you want to use for dharma, or translation you want to use for English, reminders of dharma keep us on the path to God. Because if we live virtuously, if we live dutifully, if we live morally, that is the way we can stay on the path to Krishna. But here, what is happening is the reminders of dharma, they are a test. Will the gopis accept this? Now, Ananda Champu has a very delightful comparison over here. It describes how there is something similar has happened earlier. This is right now we are in the 29th chapter. of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, the numbering of chapters in Anandavan Champu is different. I'm talking about 29th chapter in the 10th canto. So if you see, what happens is there is chapter 23 in the 10th canto, 10.23 if you consider. So there, the Yagik Brahman Patnis, the Brahman Patnis, they come to Krishna. Now, when they come to Krishna, at that time, what happens? They also face opposition. That is a very beautiful pastime, and it is described in much more detail in Anandavan Champu than what it is in the 10th canto. So, to understand, to contextualize the gopis' love for Krishna and how it is so exalted, we'll just take a quick detour and look at that pastime. So, what happens over there is, in that particular pastime, the gopis, not the gopis, they too face opposition from their husbands. So now there the opposition is slightly different. There's a lot of difference in the context. So this pastime, it happens in the daytime. It happens, there is no flute song of Krishna. So this is daytime. In the Raslila happens in the night time. It's daytime, no flute song, but Krishna's call, Krishna, actually you could say Krishna's request for food through his friends. So now, if you could see here over here, the Yagik Brahman Patnis, their love is also very great. And there the contrast is also between, say, ritual adherence and devotional transcendence. Their husbands are very ritualistic. This is the sacrifice. Do this, and we do this precisely. But at that particular point, in that pastime, when the Gopas come over there, the Gopas ask for the food, and the Yagi Brahmanas, they don't pay any attention at all. And now there might be, so actually the Brahmanas are not just ritualistic. If you see, what Krishna does is ritualistic and worse. Why is it ritualistic and worse? That, see, rituals are not bad, but ritualism that blinds us to the purpose of rituals is bad. So what's happening over here is that, so now why are we going in this detour? Let me explain this. We are discussing how the love of the gopis for Krishna, and especially Radharani for Krishna, is so exalted and so extraordinarily selfless. So to understand how great their love is, we are contrasting it with the love of the Yagik Brahman Patnis. And for that, we need to understand what the Yagik Brahman Patnis did. That their love is also not a small thing. It is, what they did was also extraordinary. So they are caught in performing the sacrifice. It's not just a small sacrifice. The sacrifices are of different kinds, and some sacrifices are relatively small, where a person simply has their own home and they perform a yajna in the, so they have what is called home in their home. A home is some small sacrificial kunda where they perform sacrifice in their own home. But this is a far grander sacrifice which the Brahmanas are performing as a part of their Brahminical duty. And they have got lots of food, lots of yajna, ahuti, and many other things like that for Krishna. For performing the yajna, which is ultimately meant for the yajna by Vishnu, for Vishnu and other devatas. And when they are having this, the Gopas come over there And the Gopas tell them, they're very polite and very respectful, and they say that, no, Krishna is here and Krishna needs some food. And Krishna tells them, actually, don't use my name, use Balram's name. Because these are Brahmanas who are serving Kamsa, and they may not respect a Vaishya, because if you consider from the social hierarchy perspective, Brahmana, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. So Krishna is a Gopa, at least external perspective, the way he has appeared. So he tells them that they may not respect me, but they'll respect Kshatriyas. And Balram is known to be a Kshatriya. So Balram is hungry. Can you please give some food? So when they tell this, the Brahmanas don't pay any attention to them at all. Now, at this point, the Gopas also explain, yes, normally if a sacrifice is started, that just like if we have Ekadashi, that we don't take food from a particular time to a particular time. So like that, even when a yajna is being performed, there is a lot of charity that is given. Charity of food is an important part of a yajna. But generally, the charity is given after the completion of the yajna. And once the yajna has begun, till the end, there is no distribution of charity. But the Gopas explain that actually you have not yet begun the yajna. So the Gopas are also not ignorant about scripture and ritual. So the Gopas tell that actually you are not forbidden to give food to us right now, because the sacred time is still going, is not yet over, or the sacred time has not yet begun when you can't give the food. So, okay, but still they pay no attention. And then the Gopas go back disappointed. And then Krishna tells, go to their wives. Now, it's interesting that the Brahmanas are performing yajna, are they making preparations for the yajna in the yajna-sthali. And near the yajna-sthali, there is the kitchen. This is a slightly different place. So the Gopas then go not to the yajna-sthali, but to the kitchen. And now, why the significant? That actually the Brahman Patnis, the Brahmana's wives, they actually perform a greater yajna without even entering into the yajna-sthali. They leave when they hear that Krishna is here and Krishna wants food. They take the best food items that they have. They put them carefully in baskets and they immediately rush out. Now here you will see, they don't have to go. So what is their love is also very great. If you consider so when I say the Brahmanas are ritualistic and worse, because even within their ritual adherence, they could have given food to Krishna's Gopas, but they did not give. So the Brahman Patnis, if you consider their glory, what is their glory? No. They responded immediately. That is one thing. And not only immediately they responded, their husbands forbade them. You cannot go now. Where are you going? You are needed for the sacrifice. They neglected their husbands. Now, not only did they neglect their husbands, it was to what was meant for their husbands' yajnas. So, if you consider later, this is chapter 23, and immediately after this is the Govardhan Leela. And in the Govardhan Leela, what happens is, Indra, there is a yajna meant to be done for Indra, and when what is meant to be offered to Indra through yajna, and that is taken away by the Gopas, then what is meant to be offered to him is given to Govardhan. Indra becomes enraged and Indra tries to destroy Vrindavan entirely. So now the Brahman Patnis know that their husbands are powerful Brahmanas. So disobeying them is bad enough. Then taking away what is meant for their yajna, that is worse. And the Brahman husbands could have cursed them. And curse of a Brahmana is a terrible thing. There are examples, many examples in scripture of a husband cursing his wife because of perceived wrong on her part. There is the example of of Parshuram's father Jamadagni, mm, cursing Renuka, and in fact he tells Parshuram itself to punish Renuka, and so the severe punishment. Similarly, there is the story of Gautam Rishi cursing his wife Ahalya because of perceived inappropriate action from her side. So what happens is here the Brahman Patnis, they are readily taking the wrath of their husbands, and they might even be cursed for that. And another important thing is, it's not just that they didn't have to go personally. This whole service they could have done discreetly. Discreetly means, oh, you want some food? Yeah, there's a lot of food over here. We can give you some food. And they could have done that. And because there was so much food, their husbands wouldn't have noticed it also. But they offered the best food and they went right when the yajna was about to start. So their sacrifice is no less. It's a huge sacrifice what the Brahman Patnis do. And then what happens over there is, they come and they offer not only the food to Krishna, but through the food, they are offering themselves to Krishna. Now, if you consider from one perspective, Krishna doesn't need food. Krishna is Sampurna, he's all complete. And this whole pastime is staged in a particular way over here. So does Krishna need food? If you consider, at one level, there are many ways of looking at this. He is all complete. He doesn't need Nijapurnam, it is said in the Bhagavatam. He is all complete. Then he is surrounded by the rich forests of Vrindavan, where there are many delicious edible fruits. In fact, the trees of Vrindavan would be delighted to offer fruits to Krishna, offer their products as gifts to Krishna. And not only that, Vraja is filled with Kalpataru, not just ordinary trees that can give fruits, but Kalpataru, desire fulfilling trees. Krishna can desire from any tree, and it can provide him whatever food he wants. So this is a Leela where Krishna is giving his devotees, the Brahman Patnis, the opportunity to express their love for him. And thus he acts as if he's hungry, and he acts as if there is nothing over here. Now, if you consider that the Brahman Patnis, they have left everything and they come to Krishna. So they offer him the food, and now even when they are coming, they know what they are doing. It is not that, yes, they are captivated by Krishna's, by knowing that Krishna wants some food, but when they are defying their husbands and going, they're very much aware that they could be ruining their life. And when they come to Krishna, they say, Krishna, we offer you this food and we offer ourselves to you. We have come and surrendered ourselves to you. And Krishna, he is beautiful verses describing Krishna's beauty at that time. How there is a flower in Krishna's ears, and how Krishna is putting one hand on the shoulder of his friend, and he welcomes all of them. He thanks them for the food that they provided. And then he says, the offering that you have made is wonderful. Now please return. So this is the point of contrast, that the gopis are told, please return. The Yajna Brahman Patnis are told, please return. And the Yajna Brahman Patnis, initially, they vehemently oppose. So they say, no, we cannot go back. So if you consider the Brahman Patni's situation, what do they say? They say that Krishna, what you are asking from us is impossible. They say what you're asking for us is like, if the Ganga, after going through many obstacles, Ganga, after going through many obstacles, finally reaches the ocean. And when it is about to reach into the ocean and unite with the ocean tells, please go back to the mountains. He says, it's impossible for us. How can we possibly go back? Now, this metaphor, which is used over here, Ananda elaborates on this metaphor. This is such an amazing metaphor. Actually, this is the metaphor that is used in the first major prayer of the Bhagavatam, where Kunti Maharani is praying that Twayi me ananya vishaya, Twayi me ananya vishaya, that Matir Madhupate Sakrit, without going toward any other object, let my consciousness flow simply towards you. So Madhupate Sakrit, Pratimudvata Adha, Gange Vauga Mudhanvati. So this is in Kunti Maharani's prayers, and I believe it's 1842, if I'm not mistaken. So what he's saying is, just as the Ganga moves towards the ocean, let my consciousness move towards you. And for the Yagi Brahman Patnis, they said that yes, our consciousness has moved towards you and we have come to your lotus feet now. How can you ask us to go back? So same metaphor is used for the flow of consciousness toward the Lord. So here, now what happens is, Krishna says that, yes, you have offered yourself to me and I accept the offering that you are making. But the way to be with me, it doesn't have to be by being with me constantly. You have seen me now. Let this be the nourishment for your devotion. With this, you remember me. You talk about me. And by thus remembering me, by talking about me among yourselves, you will attain me. And he tells them to return. Now the Brahman Patnis also express a apprehension. We have left our husbands and gone. Come to you. How will they accept us? Krishna says, don't worry. You follow my instruction, you will be protected. So now what happens is described that when they return, what happens is they are on one side, they're disappointed that Krishna didn't accept them. They accepted their offerings, but didn't accept them. And then they're apprehensive that their husbands may curse them. But what happens? Neither happens. That although they're going away from Krishna, the remembrance of Krishna stays in their heart and it enriches their hearts. And when they come back, they find that their husbands are actually very appreciative of them. They said, oh, our wives did not study scripture the way we did. They didn't know the detailed rituals, Vedic rituals, the way we know. But still, they knew the purpose of it all. And all this was meant for Krishna. And they offered themselves to Krishna, but we did not. What is the use of our learning? What is the use of our expertise and performance of yajna? What is the use of our recitation of mantras? It's all useless. Diktam. This is, they condemn it. Now, what brings about a transformation? Such a dramatic transformation. That dramatic transformation comes up because of a particular reason. What happens is, their husbands decide to go ahead with the yajnas. They make the best of what they have and they continue with the yajnas. They don't have all the best offerings, but whatever offerings they have, they use it. And when they perform the yajnas, they are very, very apprehensive that will the yajna be successful? Because they're not offering the best that they have, because it was taken away from them. But surprisingly for them, when they perform the yajnas, it's successful. And the devatas appear over there. And normally, if the devatas appear in a sacrifice, that's considered to be glorious. That's considered to be magnificent. But here, the devatas' appearance in a yajna, it's like a resounding sign of success. It's a resounding sign of success of the yajna. It's like if a particular ceremony is being performed in a particular part of the world, and then at the prize distribution time, at that time, the prime minister or the president of that country appears, and they give away the prizes. They give a speech. Oh, that means this country is fully behind this tournament being held, and they fully support it. So it's a rough metaphor, but the visible appearance of the in the yajnas, that is considered to be a resounding success. But although at one level the brahmanas are happy to see the devatas coming, but the devatas, when they appear, it is described that they are not smiling, they're frowning. In fact, they're glaring. And they say that you have displeased us. The brahmanas are taken aback. Now, if our yajna has displeased us, and please tell us what we can do to correct, but then how is it that you have come here? He says that you have displeased us, and how you have displeased us, we want to tell you that. And they tell that we all work under Krishna, we all work for Krishna's pleasure. Krishna is our Lord. In fact, Krishna is that supreme Vishnu who has descended into this world. And you had an opportunity to offer bhoga to Krishna, and you did not. And therefore we are displeased with you. Okay. Now it's like a light opens in their head, but this light, when it opens, it doesn't necessarily bring you could say joy. What it brings is horror. It brings apprehension for them. What happened? How did we do something like this? But then Devatas say that actually, although we are displeased with you that you neglected Krishna, but your wives did not. Your wives did not neglect Krishna. They went to Krishna, and they are your redeeming grace. So we have come here to tell you not just the glory of Krishna whom you missed, but the glory of your wives who did not neglect Krishna. So in one sense, just as Kaliya was saved from Krishna's wrath, Krishna's anger, and Krishna's punishment because of the Nagapatnis praying to Krishna. So similarly, what happens is the Brahman Patnis, in one sense, they defy their husbands. But in that defiance of their husbands, they're actually protecting their husbands. Because they, by their actions, please Krishna, and that pleases even the Devatas. And the Devatas appear in the Brahmanas Yajna. So in this way, they are filled with appreciation for their wives. So the point is that Krishna arranges that from the Brahman Patni's perspective, when they leave everything and go to Krishna, they are ready to risk everything for Krishna's sake. But Krishna protects them. And how does he protect them? Through the arrangement of the Devatas. So the Brahmanas welcome them. And yet what happens is that it's not too late. They could also go themselves and surrender to Krishna. But they do not do it. They have understood Krishna's divine position. They have understood their wife's special position. And they accept their wives, they glorify their wives, in fact, not just accept their wives back, they glorify their wives. But although in one sense, in their private life, in their one-to-one interactions, they are ready to accept and glorify their wives, they still do not have the courage to publicly exhibit their devotion. They know Krishna is God, but still the memory of Krishna's of Kamsa's horrible activities, how Kamsa killed newborn children, how Kamsa arrested his own father, how Kamsa terrorized the members of the dynasty, the Yadu dynasty. All those are still there in their heads. And therefore, what happens is their knowledge of Krishna's position, Krishna's ultimate position, is overshadowed by their, you could say, knowledge of Kamsa's immediate position. What is Kamsa's immediate position? That Kamsa is the king and he can terrorize us. Therefore, what do? We can't do anything. And that is how they get into big trouble. They get into big trouble. That they lose the opportunity to please Krishna themselves. So the point we are making over here is not an analysis of Brahman Patti pastime or Brahmana the Brahman Patti pastime, but the point is that the Brahman Patnis risk everything to go to Krishna, and that risk is well rewarded by Krishna's arrangement. But the key point is Krishna uses the same argument for the gopis. And he says, please return. It is not proper for you to be here with me. And the gopis, they actually respond to all of Krishna's arguments. And so it's like devotion through disobedience. Now, how can normally devotion is seen through obedience? And that's important. As a normal way, Prabhupada talks about 3 levels of servants. The first class servant, what happens is, understands the mind of the master and acts accordingly to fulfill the desire of the master within the mind. First class is understands the mind of the servant, mind of the master. The second class is what? Follows the instructions of the master. And the third class, what does they do? The third class disobeys or disregards the instructions of the master. So now, in one sense, you could say in this context, we have, sometimes when we use the word second class, we may consider that very low. It's not a low level. It is also a very high level. So the Brahman Patnis, they act on the second class level. Krishna tells them to go and they go back. Krishna tells the gopis to go back and they refuse to go back. And they tell Krishna, actually you say that we have come to behold the beauty of Vrindavan. Yes, but the most beautiful thing in the forest of Vrindavan is you. We come to see you. You say that, we should follow. We should not leave our family members and go away. Say, you are our greatest family member. You are the Lord of our heart. We will be with you. So that itself is a very beautiful discussion, how the gopis turn around each of the arguments that Krishna gives and they respond sweetly, devotionally to what Krishna is saying. And they insist that they will be with Krishna. So here, what is happening is, the Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. So at one level, so the gopis are demonstrating Sarva Dharman at how the gopis demonstrate 1866 in the Gita. So Sarva Dharman can refer to the dharma that they do Parityajya. So at one level it is their family duty, but at another level it is also you could say the devotional duty of obeying the words of Krishna. So they understand the heart of Krishna, and Krishna tells them to go back, and I say no. So dharma that they give up. So the dharma that they give up is not just the family dharma, not just their, not even their stri dharma of being faithful, of being chaste. Even beyond that, all that they give up, but even when a devotee is told a certain thing by the Lord, a devotee should be doing that thing told by the Lord. But the gopis understand the heart of Krishna. We see this dynamic even in the Chaitanya Leela, where Lord Chaitanya tells Nityananda Prabhu, don't come to Jagannath Puri. The world is to be delivered, and your duty is to deliver the world. So stay in Bengal and continue your missionary activities there. And Nityananda Prabhu, in spite of that, he comes. Every year he comes with the Mayapur Vasis to the Bengali Vaishnavas to meet Lord Chaitanya. So that's, in one sense, go beyond the literal word of the Lord to understand and fulfill the heart's desire of the Lord. So this is the extraordinary level of the gopis' love. And what is happening with the gopis is their selflessness is seen in what they give to Krishna and what they give up for Krishna. They offer themselves to Krishna and they give up not just their obedience to their family members, but their obedience even to the literal word of Krishna. Now, there are multiple other considerations also. It is not that when we say that the gopis are exalted devotees, that does not necessarily mean that the Yagik Brahman Patnis are low-level devotees. They are also very exalted devotees. And Krishna wants them to serve in a different way. And Gopal Anandanand also describes that Krishna was playing the role of a Vaishya, and the gopis were also from a Vaishya family. So the disruption of society that would happen if Krishna and the gopis came together would not be as much as if the Brahman Patnis from Mathura came and be with him. So Krishna did not want to create such disruption. And that is also another reason why he told them to go back. The same pastime can be understood at multiple levels. But the point is that the gopis are demonstrating their willingness to give up everything for Krishna. And this is the sweetness, the exaltedness of their love for him. Now, when they do this, Krishna becomes very pleased with them. And then Krishna and the gopis start performing the Ras Leela. And when they're about to go deep into the Ras Leela, something happens. And when that something happens, the gopis are dancing with Krishna, and suddenly they find Krishna has disappeared. And then they look around and they see that not only has Krishna disappeared, one particular gopi has disappeared. That is, Radharani has disappeared. And then they immediately become shattered. They become shocked and they are searching frantically for Krishna. So how they search for Krishna and how they meet Radharani and what exactly happens, that we will discuss in our last session on next Sunday. So today I'll summarize and then we will have some question answers and if possible, one brief exercise also. So today we discussed about the pastime of Krishna with the Madhuri Leela pastime of Krishna with the Ras Leela, and broadly discussed about how does the Anandanand Champu depict Ras Leela. So it is depicting the Ras Leela from the perspective of the gopis. What were the challenges they faced? What are the sacrifices that they made? And in that connection, how the same pastime, when understood from a different perspective, illuminates different dimensions. So Lord Ram's exile, seen from Sita's perspective, different from seen from, say, Kaushalya's perspective. So now Krishna is the all-attractive Supreme Lord, is all-powerful. So there can be no obstacle in the fulfillment of his desire. But it is tension, opposition, anxiety that creates excitement, that brings joy when there's actual union. So Krishna creates creates obstacles. So how does he create obstacles? So in Vrindavan, the conservative, the traditional nature of the society by which the gopis and Krishna cannot be with each other, and how the gopis and Krishna are not in a formal relationship. It's not Swakya, it is Parkiyaras. And then Krishna calls them at night. That means it's a time when it's entirely inappropriate for them to go. So Krishna in one sense makes an unreasonable demand from them. And the love is seen by what the gopis give to Krishna and what they give up for Krishna. So what they give to Krishna is they offer themselves completely to him. And they have to dodge all their family members and go. So they are ready to risk not only social disapproval, but social ruination for the sake of pleasing Krishna. And that is they exhibiting Sarva Dharman Parityajya. Even the reputation of chastity, the reputation of purity of faithfulness, they are ready to even lose that for Krishna's sake. And then when Krishna comes, Krishna plays with them by welcoming them and telling them, go back now. And at that point, we contrasted it with the Brahman Patni situation. Their going to Krishna was also no less a sacrifice. When they went to Krishna, first of all, they didn't have to go personally. Krishna didn't call them. Krishna had called the gopis by playing this flute. Krishna had only asked for food. They didn't have to go themselves, but they went themselves. They took the best food. They neglected their husbands' restraining words, and they risked being rejected or even cursed by their powerful Brahmana husbands. They did all that for Krishna's sake. And then Krishna tells them to go back. They protested vehemently. He says, how can the Ganga, which has come down from the mountains to the ocean, now go back to the mountains? Although they spoke very eloquently, when Krishna told them to go back, to remember him within their hearts, they agreed. And they went back. By the Lord's arrangement, the Devatas came and instructed the Brahmanas in the glories of Krishna and the glories of their own wives, the Brahmanas' wives, and that's how they accepted and respected their wives. But in contrast with the gopis, Krishna told them to go back, but they did not go back. And this is actually a testimony to their devotion, that they focused not just on the literal words of Krishna, but they focused on the heart of Krishna. I mentioned in the beginning how the Gita gives the identity of the Lord, the Bhagavatam gives the activities of the Lord, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita gives the mentality, the attitude, the thought process of the Lord. So at that Bhagavat level, the gopis could intuit what Krishna was thinking, and they understood this is a test for us. Will we listen to the literal word of the Lord, or will we fulfill his heart's desire? And they refused to go back. So the gopis, their love for Krishna and the actions that come from their love, they might seem immoral, but they are not immoral, they are rather transmoral. So immoral is when we give in to our lower desires. Morality is what regulates our lower desires. But transmoral is where one has no lower desires, one is motivated simply by love. So the gopis exhibit Sarva Dharman Parityajya, not only in terms of the Stri Dharma, but the ordinary Bhagavad Dharma of obeying the word of the Lord. They go beyond that, beyond obeying the word of the Lord to fulfilling the heart's desire of the Lord. How this pastime moves forward, we'll discuss in our next session. So we have about 20 minutes now, and we will do one quick exercise if it is possible, and then we can have some question answers. So the exercise we will do is that, like we had discussed, we discussed primarily about a theme of love. So selfless devotion. So we can talk about these two things. In our practice of bhakti, what can we offer to the Lord, or what can we give to the Lord, give to Krishna, and what can we give up for Krishna. That's the way we express our devotion. So what we can do is that now, instead of looking at this from the we could look at the future, we can look at the past, we can look at the present. That means if we look back at our lives, now what is it that we have offered to Krishna that it was difficult for us to offer, but we offered it. It could also be, what was it that we sacrificed for Krishna's sake? This could be from our personal perspective. We could turn this and look at from another perspective also. In our devotional circles, if we see, if this first could be a little bit personal, and did we see any devotee give something special to Krishna, or did we see some devotee give up something special for Krishna's sake? So that means that we can see this to look at, we can look at this for appreciating our own, for understanding how we are expressing our devotion. And we can also look at it to see how devotees around us are offering something special to Krishna. And we can also look at this from the perspective of, we look at Srila Prabhupada's life, we look at our Acharya's life, we look at our senior Vaishnava's life. Hare Krishna, sorry. So what we're discussing is that how we can, what can we give to Krishna and what can we give up for Krishna, or what have we seen some other devotees give up for Krishna? What have we seen Srila Prabhupada or our Acharyas or our senior Vaishnavas or do this in Krishna's service? So basically the idea is how, I was talking about pure devotion and selfless devotion. At one level they are the same, but the purity is, it's a little abstract. How do we develop purity? When will we develop purity? And sometimes our contaminations may keep recurring in our hearts, in our lives. So what can we do? Instead of worrying so much about purity, we can focus on these two principles. Okay, what can I give to Krishna and what can I give up for Krishna's sake? So by that, we could decide this even from the perspective of one day. Okay, during this day, what can I do? During this day, say today when I am going to read Bhagavatam, say for half an hour, at that time, I'm going to put my phone aside. And I'm going to give my consciousness completely to Krishna at that time. And I'm not going to do anything else. So it could be something very simple. We don't have to make this in terms of, oh, I will give $1 million to Krishna and I will earn that much and I will give that. Okay, there can be grand gestures of devotion. If it is possible for us, that's wonderful. Or I'll give up the world, I'll renounce and I will retire from my life, I'll go to Vrindavan and I'll stay there. I'll give up for Krishna. That if it is suitable for us, anukul for us, that is also appropriate in its own way. But the point is, instead of thinking of in big terms, let's think of in our daily lives, when we are trying to practice bhakti, the way to express our devotion is, what can we give to Krishna and what can we give up for Krishna? So give up something which sometimes distracts us. Now, giving up doesn't necessarily mean we have to give up completely also. It could be contextually for a particular period of time. Give up something for Krishna. So there are two questions. We will have about 5 minutes to start with this. Now, there's a question that we cannot give anything to Krishna because everything is given to me by Krishna. Yeah, that is of course true. But that doesn't mean that we can't consciously choose to offer. Can all of you please mute yourself? So we can say that we cannot give anything to Krishna, which is true. But does that mean from practical perspective that we can't offer anything to Krishna? We can. We can say everything is given to us by Krishna. But just like when we worship the Ganga, we take some water from the Ganga and offer it back to the Ganga. When a child, say you have a small child and that it's your birthday, and the child comes and gives a small chocolate to you. If the child has got the chocolate, child has not done some job and got money, or whatever the child has got from you only. But when your child gives you a chocolate or gives you some gift on your birthday, you're not concerned with the thing that is given. You appreciate the love of the child. So that at a philosophical level, it's important to remember that yes, everything we have is given by Krishna. But that if we over philosophize that, then where is the devotional reciprocation? Devotional reciprocation means, okay, at this point in my life, this is in my kshetra. It is by Krishna's arrangement. So by Krishna's arrangement, right now, say, you could say my whole life is given to be my Krishna. That is true. Okay, but my whole life is given to my Krishna. In that, in the next, say 2 hours, I'm attending this class. Next 2 hours, I'm doing this japa. Next 2 hours, I'm going to the temple. Or whatever it is, these 2 hours, I will try to offer my consciousness and offer my time and offer my heart to Krishna. So philosophically, it's good to understand that everything comes from Krishna and everything is given to us by Krishna. But in the form of a devotional reciprocation, yes, we need to think about what can I give to Krishna? And again, thinking that ultimately, if I don't give up consciously, Krishna, everything will be taken by Krishna, everything will be renounced by Krishna. So that is fine. That is also philosophically true. But there is something called voluntary offering, and there is something called like involuntarily giving up. At death, we will have to give up everything that we are attached to. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we are that will give us some credit by that. It is voluntarily, and we choose to offer ourselves to Krishna or offer something for Krishna, give something for Krishna. That is when we get devotional credit, and that's when we grow. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes now. So Shiv Krishna Prabhu, should we take some question answers or should we
whatever,
do this?
I mean, we can also take question answers. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do one thing. Can we, in the next session, we'll start with this exercise that what can we give to Krishna and what can we give up for Krishna? We can start with this exercise in the last session. And then we will conclude our last session also. So here, I'll take a few questions. We have questions here by so we have questions that, do demons exist in Golok Vrindavan? Well, not in Golok Vrindavan. There are rumors of demons, but there are no demons in Golok Vrindavan. So whatever is Anukul for Krishna's pastime, that is present. So there are so there are personalities like Jatila and Kotila in the spiritual world. So are they opposed to Krishna? And if they're opposed to Krishna, then How are they present in the spiritual world? Well, there are different kinds of oppositions to Krishna. There are opposition to Krishna that is coming from the soul's own desire to defy Krishna, and there is opposition to Krishna that is coming from the soul's desire. There is opposition to Krishna which comes by the Lord's plan. The Lord wants to play a role. What Lord wants them to play a particular role. So what this means is that, say, if a drama is being performed, and within the drama, say there is a hero. Sometimes in the movie, the hero is there, and the hero is also like the director or the screenwriter, so screenplay writer. So the hero is playing multiple roles in that sense. So there might be somebody who's opposed to the hero, but that is by the plan of the drama itself. So that is different from when the drama is being performed. Suddenly, some criminals or some disruptors come up and they start shooting among the audience. They start throwing bombs or grenades on the stage. They start blowing up the whole drama theater. So that's very different. So those living beings who are envious of Krishna, they are not a part of Krishna's internal pastimes in the spiritual world. But those who are like Jatila and Kutila, those who are there in the spiritual world, they are playing unfavorable roles, but that is by Krishna's plan. So now so that's the difference between the Gopi, by the Jatila, Kutila, and those characters like that. Whereas those who are envious of Krishna, they will not go to Krishna at all. That is true. They are not envious of Krishna. They are given inimical roles by Krishna as per his plan. So it is more like within the Leela, they are acting in that way, but they have no intrinsic envy towards the Lord. So do the Chandravali and her Sakhis also descend to the world to preach Krishna consciousness? That we see the devotees and acharyas in our tradition are Sakhis and Manjaris of Radharani. Well, these are esoteric details, and in our particular sampradaya, there's a focus on Radharani. So naturally, it is her associates that are highlighted and they are described. So just because one particular Vaishnava or one particular Gopi or the group of gopis is being highlighted, that doesn't mean others are to be minimized in any way. So they are also exalted. And do they descend? Yes. They may also have their lineage, their tradition, and they may come in their tradition. It is not that those who are Sakhis in Chandravali's group, they are in any way hostile to Krishna. They're just serving Krishna in a different mood. And those who are pure but not favorable to Radharani, will they go to Chandravali's group in future when they're liberated? It's for most of us, it's too premature to ask this question, because when we talk about being unfavorable to Radharani, do we even know what Radharani is, who Radharani is? Do we even know who Krishna is? We just have some understanding of these pastimes based on what we have heard, what we have understood, and how much of our present attraction is transcendental and how much of it is circumstantial. That means, say somebody says that, when I hear Ram Katha, I feel more attracted than when I hear Krishna Katha. Does that mean my Swarupa is in Ayodhya and not in Goloka? Maybe, maybe not. Because it could very well be that we grew up in our childhood hearing Ram Katha. And that's why there is some cultural attraction to Lord Ram. It's not a transcendent, the attraction doesn't necessarily mean it has to be transcendental attraction, which will lead us to liberation and to the position in that particular pastime, that particular lila thereafter. So there are quite many factors. So at this stage, I think it's too premature to consider whether we are favorable or unfavorable to Radharani or whatever, things like that. Okay, so There's one more. When we say the gopis give themselves to Krishna, is it 1866 or is there some other rationale to it? Well, the gopis give themselves to Krishna means that they are actually, they serve Krishna with their body, mind, heart, with their everything. In the previous session, I discussed about how Radharani cooks for Krishna. It is not just Radharani, with her Lalita and Vishakha and others also, they are also doing their part. They are also offering to Krishna. They are also assisting Radharani in cooking for Krishna. So it's a combined thing that they are offering. So that means when the gopis go to Krishna, specifically when Krishna calls them for performing the Rasleela, at that time they are ready to offer their entire being to Krishna. Whatever way they can please Krishna, they are there to please him. So they may sing, dance, they may chat with him, they may have the parties with him, they may reciprocate with him in every possible way within the Madhurya Rasa framework for fulfilling, for satisfying Krishna. It is said about Radharani that she is the fulfiller of all the desires of Krishna. Sarva vanchitartha sadhika. So whatever be the desire of Krishna, however he desires to be pleased, Radharani pleases him in that way. That is the meaning of the gopis offering themselves to Krishna.
Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you. So, are there any other questions or reflections? Does giving up everything for Krishna extend even to the threat of life? For example, the moth is attracted to the flame. Well, giving up is one thing, but for what we are giving up, with what understanding, with what conception, that is very important. That's why it's not just, there are two aspects: what we give up and for what we give up. So there could be, as the example you gave, a moth is attracted to fire, and the moth dies because of that attraction to the fire. So there could be attractions in this world which are not spiritually uplifting, and they involve a sacrifice, but they are fatal. Say, for example, somebody gets addicted to alcohol. Then they are ready to give up everything for their addiction. They may they may lose their wealth, they may lose their health, they may lose their reputation, they may lose their job, they may even risk their life, say driving under alcohol influence, they may lose their relationships. So they're giving everything up, but that is tamasic. So just giving everything up is not important. So what we give up and for what we give up, both are important. So for example, now there are jihadis who supposedly they say they're dying for God, for the sake of Allah. But what is their conception? Is it that they are really filled with so much love for Allah that they can't live without thinking about Allah for one moment? No, hardly. When they think that they're giving up for Allah's sake or whatever, this is also a very extremist interpretation done by some groups of Muslims. But when they think that they are giving up their life, actually what they are giving up is, okay, they are dying, they are killing, and they are laying down their life, but they are probably, they're more attracted not by the conception of Allah and being with Allah. They are attracted more with the reward that Allah is going to give them, or they are indoctrinated into believing that they will get the awards. They will be in some kind of you could say a materialistic version, a religious version of a sensual paradise. A sensual paradise is for them their version of whatever the next life is. It is filled with beautiful angels, it is filled with the delicious drinks, and that is what they're attracted to. So they are not giving, they may claim to be giving up for God's sake, but they're not giving up for the sake of God. They're giving up for, in one sense, the same worldly desires which they think that they will not be able to fulfill in this life. So maybe in the next life they will be able to fulfill those materialistic desires. So there is an acceptance of the other world also. One is sacrificing one's life for something beyond this world. But just because they're talking about the other world doesn't mean they're necessarily talking about something spiritual. It could still be materialistic also. And then we talked about what does it mean to be envious of Krishna. So being envious of Krishna essentially means that basically a devotee or a soul is meant to serve God. But instead of serving God, assisting God in his pastimes, when a soul desires to imitate God, displease God, to do what God is doing, to want to be the center of everything. So that if it is not done in the mood of service, then that is where that's considered to be wanting to imitate the Lord. And that's considered to be envy of the Lord. So envy of the Lord means that, especially this example is seen in Shishupal. Shishupal could not bear to see the glory of Krishna. When Krishna was being offered the Agra Puja, he just couldn't bear it. And he became so enraged that he started blaspheming Krishna. And he blasphemed him once, twice, thrice. And when he blasphemed Krishna 100 times, then he was punished. So basically, not wanting to see Krishna glorified and instead wanting to glorify oneself and thus displace Krishna as the center, as the enjoyer of everything, that is basically being envious of Krishna. Okay. So thank you very much for joining today. And in our last session, we'll discuss about did the gopis actually become proud? That's why Krishna left them, or was there something else happening over there? What the gopis' thoughts were, and how their exalted love is being demonstrated in the Ras Leela pastime. That we'll discuss in our last session. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anand Vrindavan Champu ki Hari Hari. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Grace Chandra Charan Prabhu ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be of service.
Thank you.